On behalf of the publisher Niyogi Books, it is my privilege to welcome you all to this evening's program, the launch of India Now and in Transition, edited by Atul K Thakur. We would like to thank each and every one of you for your presence here this evening, and we look forward to a thought-provoking and insightful discussion. We'd like to begin by inviting our distinguished guests for the evening to please take their seats on the dais. May I request our respected chair and moderator for the evening, Shri Bimal Jalan, and our eminent panelists, Shri T.S.R. Subramaniam, Shri Wajahat Habibullah, Shri Dhruv Jaishankar, Shri Omer Ahmed, Ms. Pallavi Rebapragada, and Shri Atul Thakur to please come forward and take their places. A few words about the book we are launching today. Niyogi Books has previously published India since 1947, looking back at a modern nation, which was Atul Thakur's first edited collection of essays in 2013. That collection traced India's progress since independence till the early 21st century. Since India is in the midst of such rapid social, political, and technological changes that impact all aspects of our lives, we felt there was a need to bring out a more contemporary collection of essays by eminent experts in various fields. India Now and in Transition is a result of that collective effort. The book has contributions from leading thinkers, many of whom are present here today, who have analyzed different aspects of India's politics and governance, economics and development, security and foreign policy, society and culture, and language and literature. In order to discuss these aspects of India further, we have an eminent panel of leading thinkers today, whom I'll introduce briefly. Shri Bimal Jalan was Governor of the Reserve Bank of India and a nominated member of the Rajya Sabha. Previously, he was... We have an audience of all ages today. Previously, he was Finance Secretary, Chairman of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. He has also represented India on the boards of the IMF and the World Bank, and is currently Chairman, Expenditure Management Commission. He has authored many books, including most recently an edited volume, Politics Trumps Economics, The Interface of Economics and Politics in Contemporary India. Sir, we are truly honored by your presence here this evening. Shri T.S.R. Subramaniam, a veteran bureaucrat, known as a dynamic and forthright speaker, is a founder member and former Chancellor of the Shiv Nadar University and former Cabinet Secretary of India. He is the author of several books, including most recently, India at Turning Point, The Road to Good Governance. His hard-hitting article in the book we are launching today is, Can India Afford Not to Eliminate Corruption? So we are very privileged by your presence here today. Shri Wajahat Habibullah is a retired IAS officer who has worked extensively in Kashmir. He was the first Chief Information Commissioner of India and thereafter Chairperson of the National Commission for Minorities. He is a prominent political analyst and the author of several publications, including My Kashmir, The Dying of the Light. His article in our book is titled Kashmir Today and the Way to the Future. So we're extremely glad to have you here today for today's event. Shri Dhruv Jaishankar is a public policy professional. He is currently a Fellow for Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institution's India Center in New Delhi. He manages Brookings India's activities related to international affairs and security. His article in our book is Indian Strategy in a Non-Strategic Age. So we're very pleased that you're here today to share your thoughts with us. Shri Omer Ahmed is an author, journalist, and columnist. He has written several books, including the novel Jimmy the Terrorist, which won the Vodafone Crossword Book Award. His article in our book is titled Indian Internal Security, Are We Sacrificing the Security of Our Citizens at the Altar of the Security of the State? So we thank you for your presence here today to discuss such a crucial issue. Ms. Pallavi Rebapragada is an author, journalist, and columnist based in New Delhi. Her first work of fiction, Upon a Bright Red Bench, was assessed at the Yale Writers' Conference in 2014. Her article in our book is Indian Cinema, Forever in Search of its Golden Era. Ma'am, we're delighted that you're here to grace the occasion with your presence. Shri Atul Thakur is a public policy professional, journalist and columnist. He has written for some of the leading publications in South Asia and has previously edited India since 1947. Apart from conceptualizing the collection, he is also a contributor, and his article in the book is The Real Other of the World's Largest Democracy. We are glad that you entrusted your manuscript to us and are here for the launch today. We regret to inform you that a previous speaker, Shri Samir Saran, could not be present here today. I know some of you here have come to see him, but we're sorry he isn't here. May I now request Shri Bimal Jalan to unveil the book, and this will be followed by a photo session. All the panelists, please, if everyone could unveil the book together collectively.
Yeah, this side. Okay. Ma'am, this side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now request Shri Bimal Jalan to initiate the proceedings with his opening remarks and then carry forward the panel discussion. The discussion will be followed by a question and answer session.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to Niyogi Books and, of course, Mr. Atul Thakur, for inviting me to participate in this program to release this book, India Now and in Transition. This is obviously a very, very important topic for discussion, where India is now, and of course, in transition from where we are to where we want to be. So, and we are fortunate to have with us today 5 distinguished panelists, and also the editor of the book, Atul Thakur. All the panelists are here, so they've already been introduced, so I won't take any much of your time. As you are all aware, this book that we have just released is an excellent collection of 37 essays on a wide range of subjects which cover not only economics, politics, governance, but also foreign policy, society, security, culture, and so on. And Atul Thakur has done a tremendous job of being able to edit this kind of a collection for perusal by all professionals, all the people who are interested in India, not only now, but also in transition, and every student of economics, politics, or what you might say governance in our country. So I have no doubt that this book will also be of some interest to the policymakers, and you would see some impact of this on the formulation of India's policy, not only now, but also in the future. Given the wide range, given the very wide range of subjects and areas covered in the book, I would suggest that now we move to the panel discussion. Each of our distinguished panelists may like to speak on their views regarding India's future production, future prospects on the whole, that India in transition. And of course, that would cover India now also. What do they think about it? Or if any of our panelists so decides, he and she could also choose one essay of particular interest to him or to her and give his views on the issues covered in that essay. But I hope that you take the broad view, and depending on what the panelists feel, and then have an open discussion. That is the idea, that we will follow that open discussion among the panelists with Q&A. Now I understand that about 60 minutes of time is there for panel discussion. am I right? Yeah, about 60 minutes. So given that part, if I may, I would suggest each of our panelists to take a few minutes and then let's move to an open discussion among the panelists on the general theme of the book, if possible. Thank you very much. And let me now invite, and Atul, of course, is a part of the team which will be speaking, but last. Last. So, dear sir, may I request you, a very old friend of mine. As long as you speak. Yeah. Okay. I keep it to 8-9 minutes.
There's a danger I may go to a speech mode there.
No.
Half an hour. Because the time constraint you have given me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Bill. Very, very kind of you. Thank you, Atul, and thank you, Niyogi Publishers. Delightful to see you all. Let me start with saying that Atul, I think, is an excellent section of essays. I think that these, except probably one or two, and include mine, others are of very high quality. Others are of very high quality, and it covers a very large range. It covers, as Bimal said, politics, governance, economy, and it covers security, social society, culture, languages. It covers a whole lot. Firstly, since the discussion session, let me just in 1 minute talk about the high quality of this. The speakers, the writers are obviously deep thinkers of the subject. Obviously, this book is clearly worth reading. You may or may not agree with many of the points. In fact, some of the essays I read, some of them I could have a dispute, but clearly there are very well articulated perspective and point of view mentioned there. Having said that, let me give, in other words, I'm basically saying it's excellent, recommend that. Let me look at an additional picture as to what we have emerged outside the book for discussion here. You have talked of transit. The first book was 47 onwards. So we have transited for 70 years now. We have transited for 70 years. We are now at transition. So let us see what the transition is going to give us now. I say that in transition, I see in 70 years, I see every single human index has gone down. Every single human index. I can give 30, 40, 50 human index. It relates to education, child death, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pollution, whatever it may be. I hope transition means that we should not become worse in the next 5 years or 10 years. Transition means that it is going to improve here. I saw some excellent articles on land reform. I have seen some excellent articles on judicial reform, though probably the criticism was muted, and I noticed that the criticism in most of the articles is well targeted, well done, but slightly muted. I mean, people have been careful in expressing their views. So let me come to the additional part, which hope will cover the next book of, I'm already treating this as a success. I'm already seeing this as a pathbreaker. Let me, the next book. I see one gap here. There is here perspective of thinking that this is the cribbing of the rich man. This is the cribbing of the haves in India. The have-nots are not represented in this book. I don't see that. Don't forget, 80% of the people are have-nots.
My onus is on nationalism.
No, wait a minute. I understand. I think our job in 70 years to bring excellence to 80%, not to 5%. Excellence has to be 80%. I'm not criticizing the book. I'm talking this excellent articles, etc. 80% is poor, including agriculture. 70% of the economy, if you include the agricultural economy and the informal economy, is there's no representation here. That's India, really. The other perspective I'm bringing is, this is Bimal is very respected. Not just I have great affection for Bimal. I worked with him very closely for a long period of time, and I know his excellent qualities. So what I say is not against him. I am a very strong critic of the IAS class. Very strong critic. I have repeatedly felt that the failures of India are largely to be attributed to the IAS class because they have watched quietly as the disaster struck, they did not stand up, they looked the other way and did not stand up. Similarly, I think a lot of the blame will have to go to our economist class also. Somehow, the economists who have learned in Harvard and in Chicago have come, they don't know India by and large, except present company exempted, but they don't know India, and they have come and taught us. They don't know. Mahatma Gandhi, I think, knew 10 times more all the economists of India in the past put together. This is the harsh reality. I'll give you only one instance, I won't take too much time. The last Jaitley's budget talked of 6 crores small units, tiny units in India. 6 crores. Average employment 3 to 4 to 5. This is average employment. Now, I did a detailed study in some other context. I find that this 6 crore units provided 92% of Indian employment, non-agricultural employment, 92. They get 8% of official finance. They get finance ranging from rate of interest 30% to 10,000%. This is the harsh reality of India. So in 70 years, we have not thought. I looked one piece from contemplating of rural India. I'll just take only 1 minute, one more minute, Bimal. Rural India. I was appalled. He says that the 70 years experiment, he says the future of India is in the cities. The future of India is in big industries. The future of India, I think this is the most astonishing thing. 70 years later, we are now saying this. Contemptuously, solution is high technology, which it is. High technology clearly is solution. It must be implement of high technology, but technology is to be implemented by people in the right direction for the right causes. For technology. So talking of GM, I introduced GM cotton in India in the 90s with great enthusiasm at that time. GM cotton. 20 years later, I greatly regret what I did. I am very unhappy. I am indirectly responsible for about 20,000 suicides. I am responsible for contamination, elimination of 500 cotton varieties in India. I am responsible for, this is now going to affect also all other exports out of 30 topmost developed countries, 27 don't have GM cotton. Are they all idiots? Whole of Europe, whole of Japan, are they all? My last point is, excellently, we are moving quite well in the economic side. We have done some wonderful things in the last 3, 4, 5 years. The AGM stables cannot be cleaned in 1 year. It will take 5, 10 years. I think the present dispensation should get, without any carping or criticism, 10 clear years for them to perform and deliver. Only my comment would be, with all the great, economy is the end point. And economy is not the starting point. Economy is the sum total of so many other forces. We have not started that agenda of reforms in education, in public health, in corruption, in public administration, in election reforms, skills. We're going to have people with knives traveling all over the place 10 years later. So I think my next book, your book is absolutely first-rate book. First-rate authors, first-rate conception. I think next book, in my view, should cover that. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent opening presentation. Not that I agree with everything that you have said, but I think these are all the issues that we have to grapple with. So thank you very much. I will try to summarize it just now. We will come back to it later. And now request Sunil to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Jalan, and thank you, Atul, for asking me to write for this work. Although, of course, I have written on an area which is a sensitive area, and one which is open to considerable emotional debate at this particular time because of the state that the state is passing through. So, if I may, I would speak on that subject, and I would disagree with Mr. Subramanian to one extent that when I have dealt with the Kashmir issue, I've tried to focus on the people of Kashmir themselves. rather than the ruling elite. But unfortunately, I have to also agree with you that that the history of Kashmir in the last 70 years and the finding of the state in its present situation is also largely due to the failure of the governing initiative, and particularly myself and colleagues of my own in the civil services. I have tried to trace the history of the birth of sub-nationalism in Jammu and Kashmir, as a kind of sub-nationalism that grew all over the country, because I do believe that our country is what was converted from an empire, which means several small states brought together under imperial rule, into a nation. And it is an experiment which is unprecedented in history. It is also an experience that is unparalleled in the world. But this here is an Achilles heel. And why do you have this Achilles heel? That is what I've tried to trace. I've tried to trace it on the foundations of economic developments, political developments, and I've also tried to go deeply into religious developments. Because I think something is not understood about Jammu and Kashmir. We tend to categorize in our thinking, we tend to categorize people as Hindus, Muslims and so forth, assuming that they will all have the same mindset. Kashmir is an example, and this, I think, to be able to understand the state, is an example of a distinct form of religious practice. Unfortunately, it is a form of religious practice which is highly tolerant, highly inclusive, totally non-violent, and a history that developed over centuries. And in the 20th century, as part of the freedom movement, evolved into a concept which is known as Kashmiriyat, a concept which was developed by no other than the Kashmiri Pandit leadership of the freedom movement in J&K. All those foundations were very much on the old Sufi traditions of the state. But this is giving way increasingly to extremism, to extremist religious thought and practice. And that it is happening in a socialist, secular democracy is a tragedy. So I have not, unfortunately, been able to end my presentation with any great hope, because when you'll find that it tends to read hopefully towards the end, but it was written. It was being written at the time that the explosion of 2016 actually took place, July 2016, with the killing of Burhan Wani, who is of course described as a terrorist in the national and international media, but who is looked upon as Shaheed by almost every Kashmiri. The great tragedy is, and I've tried to trace the evolution of that, of what happened to this integrated and syncretic society. How did it break apart? How did it pave the way for the rise of religious extremism? And I'd love to be able to answer questions on this at the time when you come to discussion. But the tragedy of Kashmir, there unfortunately I do not see a triumph. The tragedy stems from failure of Indian policy insofar as Kashmir is concerned. I have also tried to recommend a way out. But in that way out, unfortunately, as I said, I have ended on a pessimistic note, because there's a young generation. That is where I point a finger against myself and my colleagues of having failed. Because that young generation, born in 1990 and thereafter, during the time of this violent this violent political movement in the state, has developed an antipathy to the country. Sadly, I was there. I was Commissioner of Kashmir in 1990 when the insurgency actually broke out. At that time, the leadership, and I've described my own relationship with them and how, and their own views on various issues. At that time, their attitude was one of anger. They felt they'd been let down. they felt that the promises of freedom which had come from the accession and then the restoration to the chief ministership of Sheikh Abdullah had not been fulfilled. Therefore, Sheikh Abdullah was in fact a prime target of that movement. But now, this focus of this anger is the very concept of India, which they see as a Hindu state. Now, this is the difficulty. When I put it to you like this, the way out also would seem easy. And I've recommended how it could be, because the systems exist, the laws exist, which have helped us to find a smooth way out of this. That is where failure of governance comes in, and that is why we find ourselves in this situation. I hope that we are able to again find our feet, but I cannot say at this stage. I cannot say, looking at the situation as it exists now, that I would like to sound optimistic about the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Wajahat. So according to you, India is not in transition.
What transition?
India is where it is. Now, Dhruv Yashankar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all of you for coming out on this evening. Thank you to my distinguished co-panelists, and thank you to Atul and to Niyogi Books for inviting me to contribute to this volume. I have focused largely on India's relations with the rest of the world. This is what I focus on professionally, and is the subject of my contribution to this chapter. But I think I won't speak specifically about my chapter, you can read it for yourselves, but I think it's nice to put some of this in context. And I would say that I'm a little bit more optimistic perhaps than some of the speakers that have followed me about India's place in the world as it is. When we think of India now and in transition, I think we need to appreciate the fact that India is now more global. In other words, the world matters more for India than at any time in its history, and India matters more for the world than at any time in its history. I'll give you just a few data points I think illustrate this. We have the number of Indian tourists that travel abroad every year has increased more than sixfold in the last 25 years. There's been a 2.5-fold increase in the size of our diaspora. India now has the largest diaspora of any country in the world. We have seen a 24-fold increase in our trade since 1991. We've seen a 112-fold increase in foreign direct investment coming into India in the last 25 years. India is today has the second largest number of internet users. It's the third largest oil importer, and it is the largest, depending on how you measure it, the largest importer of defense equipment in the world. So all of this is just to illustrate the fact that the rest of the world matters to India, and India too matters to the rest of the world. India certainly has its challenges. We've heard some of them already, but I would contend that it's no longer as insecure or resource constrained or as irrelevant as it once was. Even pessimists, or at least those who see a half glass full, would see, projecting into the future, an India that by 2030 or 2035 would be about a $4 to $5 trillion economy. This is very different from an India that existed not that very long ago. And so instead of being bogged down in some of the old debates that we have again and again about India's place in the world, I think we have to be a bit more forward-leaning about this. This requires being more aspirational, even as we remain conscious of our limitations and our vulnerabilities. It requires also being more upfront about our failures, and I think that we've heard a lot of candid talk about that, and a lot of that is reflected in the essays that we see. All countries have a grand strategy, whether they know it or not. And my essay, my contribution to this volume is about Indian strategy in a non-strategic age. And what exactly do I mean by that? What I argue is that strategy, or grand strategy at the national level, has become more difficult, not just in India, but around the world. And it's become more difficult not because the state has become weaker or more irrelevant, and this was unfortunately, I think, a bit of a myth that took hold in the 1990s and 2000s, Quite the contrary. In fact, the state has become stronger, and that's the subject of one of the essays that one of my co-panelists here wrote. But in fact, a few other things have happened. Our adversaries have become more difficult to define, whether sub-state actors, non-state actors, or other national actors. There's more cacophony in our public debate. We see this on social media here in India, we see this on our television screens, but this is true also in other countries as well. And also the tools that have become available to states have become more varied. In the past, it was really about military power, and how, when countries had disagreements, that was how they settled it. Today, the toolkit available to a nation is in fact much more varied. And so the complications relating to adversaries, relating to how we define a national interest, and how we use the tools at the disposal of the state to achieve those national interests have all become more difficult with time. I'll leave you to read my volume, my chapter, but I would just say that one of the things I do argue is that there has been a long history of strategic thought in India. Many people like to fall back on the old reliable example of Kautilya. I actually think it's a very bad example, because the fact that the text was lost for so many years actually shows how little it mattered. But instead, I think you can find it in other sources, and the example I actually cite is from the Mahabharata, and the reason I give that is because it's something that lived on in popular tradition. It was retold. It became part of the vernacular, and you do see. I mean, this is in some ways a very strategically deep text, and this is just one example of it. And we do have a long history of Indian strategic thought. What I also do in the essay is assess India's objectives at the national level, the resources and how that might change, and the changing nature of its adversaries. And so, to that end, try to come closer to a realization of what Indian strategic thought, Indian strategy is in a more non-strategic age. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaishankar. Very nice to hear from you. A positive, very positive view about India, and that's what India is all about. That you can have two views, and about India, and it is a mixed country anyway. So that's very good, and thank you very much. Now, Pallavi, may I ask you?
Yeah. So, distinguished panelists and Atul, thank you so much for inviting me here to speak. I'm an investigative reporter, and I represent the fourth pillar of democracy. I represent the space between the state and the civil society. I represent the space between where the policy is formed and where the policy is lived. At this point in history, I am not a very happy person, because I feel the media doesn't raise. I feel we don't know how to criticize, and we don't know how to be interested in what actually matters. A lot of statements, a lot of opinions, a lot of people's personal lives are in the limelight all the time. But where the policy is lived, people are suffering. They want the media to cover the news, and people just don't want to read it. It's very easy to criticize the media and say that we're not raising the right kind of issues. They're all being raised, they're just not being read. I'd actually like to quote Immanuel Kant. I've majored in sociology, so it's an old habit. In his book, The Critique of Pure Reason, he said, a self-caused immaturity is to imbibe a theory blindly without passing it through the agency of individual thought. We have individual thought. We are all intelligent. But what matters is that are we able to use that intelligence courageously and boldly? In a time where we feel that the state overpowers civil society, where there are a lot of right-wing leaders, they get away with whatever. I feel the role of the opposition is not to be a lotus eater. Just eat the lotus and derive a high and do nothing about it. What kind of alternatives are you providing? So as a journalist, I feel like there's a need to be able to think autonomously in the midst of prevailing ideas of the trending mob. The other aspect is don't criticize ideology, criticize policy. For example, like I call this a democracy of cracked pipes, because we constantly debate about consequences, but we don't fix the crack in the pipe. Nirbhaya, the Nirbhaya rape case, unfortunately, everybody remembers that. That's so fresh in our memories, that heinous act and that terrible night, which changed a lot of, how the women in Delhi think. And I'm an investigative reporter working in Delhi, so a lot of people ask me, do you find it safe to go out? And there are a lot of struggles which we don't talk about. But what I'd like to say over there is that Nirbhaya's rapist had a history of drug addiction. There are 25,000 drug addicts in Delhi and just 5 drug de-addiction centers. The government offers a 3-week course, which is just a detox program, and there's a 90% relapse rate. Now, isn't it cheaper for the state to keep these people cured? So these are the sort of debates I feel India, if it has to be in transition, if it has to move forward, a forward-leaning into a positive direction, these are the sort of debates that we should be raising. I'll give another example because I'm a reporter, so I'm going to give examples from my reportage. That I reported a story from mortuaries in Delhi, and there is an excess of, there is a huge pile of dead bodies, and the mortuaries can't handle that load. It is because the surgeon, the autopsy surgeon, they fail to recommend, they recommend a post-mortem for each and every death, a hospital death, a suicide case, a blast. So our mortuaries don't have that kind of facility they don't have the infrastructure. So as a result, a lot of people get drunk, and a lot of attendants are the ones who are doing the postmortems. So as a reporter, that is what I want in the headlines. Instead of, Narendra Modi gave a speech here, and he is the Prime Minister, he is going to give speeches. But it doesn't have to be front page news all the time. So regarding the collection, there are some fantastic essays. We're allowed to talk about a few essays, are we? Sure. There's this Rajiv Bhattacharya has written an essay on what ails the Northeast. I think that's a brilliantly written essay, which has a lot of points about like the people in Northeast who are the actual issues, like the water, the floods in Assam, and the dams from Bhutan, how they flood Assam, and irrigation issues, economic issues. So the idea is, what I like about this book is that we're not integrating the Northeast strategically and politically. We're making them a part of the country. So let's talk about issues that matter. There were 17 peace talks in the Northeast, and there were only 2 women. There's absolute zero representation. So a lot of literature, what I like about the book is that you've touched upon so many topics that it's, as a media person, I look for that diversity, and I look for that longevity in argument. It's not a piece that you turn out. There's so much pressure on the media to turn out pieces within a day or two, as Dhruv and I were just discussing a while ago. But put out researched pieces, because that if it's researched, it has a longer shelf life, and you've deconstructed issues so beautifully. Finally, I'd like to say that the book is not saffron, it's not green. As you can see the cover, it's white. So it's got colors from all segments of this democracy, this diverse democracy, and they've found representation here. I know that you disagree that there isn't adequate representation, but I think a lot of people have found their voices here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pallavi, for giving us a view from the media point of view, from the journalism point of view. India has a free press. India has very, very good journalists, so that there is no doubt. But the issue that we have raised is extremely relevant also. That what are the headlines? I mean, is it only the headlines which can catch the largest TRP or whatever they call them, or they should be.
I'd like to say this, that in one of my recent assignments, so you go and ask people that what do you want from the government. So a lot of people say हमको थोड़ा सा जहर लाके दे दो, हमें मार दो. So I feel like and that is like that is the kind of fury that's there on the streets.
No. But there is the fury is right. I mean, from some point of view, on some certain aspects of our belief. But the other side is also just as right. In the sense that. But what you have highlighted is that media would not talk about this side, but only that side.
Only that side.
So very, very good. Thank you very much. Now, Umair Ahmed.
Thank you. I'm going to speak a little off the cuff, so you can read my essay if you want.
No wonder you have folded it.
I have folded it because I think that there are certain things which should be, in a sense, obvious. And these are obvious questions that we sometimes don't ask ourselves. And in our 70th year of our independence, the key question that we need to ask is, what was it for? If it was merely for the state, that their state be strong, then that actually doesn't answer the question of the independence struggle. The independence struggle, at the end of the day, was about the freedom of Indians, our dignity as individuals, which we felt was not something that we got under the British Empire. It was about the individual, who is at the center of the Indian Constitution. But as Pallavi mentioned, in our public discourse, the individual, the Indian, is largely missing. We have large talks about state actors. Today, for the last month or so, we've been talking about the standoff between India and China near Bhutan. I don't know how many of you people have visited Bhutan. I'd recommend it. It's a fantastic country. It's our, the happiness index, let's leave that aside, but it's certainly our closest ally. But the first time when I went there, which was in 2007, I went by rail and road. And I got off at Siliguri, caught a bus, which got me into a smaller bus, across a potholed road, and I was going through this area of incredible destitution. And I thought, this is not a road to an international border. That is not what I think of when I think of traveling an international border. And then I saw this spanking new SUV with a red license plate, and these Bhutanese standing there, and I thought, damn, I wonder what they think of us. And this is a question which I would like to throw back to the audience right now, is what has the country achieved in its independence for the vast majority of our population? That is an important question because it's a question of our security. It's a question of, if my neighbor is starving, how can I talk about my country as a great power? I live in Gulmohar Park, which is a nice colony. And this morning when I was coming back after having a cup of coffee, which cost me, I think, 200 rupees for a cup, there were two women clearing gravel in front of the colony. And they had set aside their children, who were less than a year old, on the footpath while they were doing their job. These are my co-citizens. These are Indians. What have we achieved for them? And if we have not achieved that security, whether it's a matter of some kind of semblance of belonging, how successful are we going to be able to keep the security of each other? That is a reflection I'm sure that the Bhutanese make when they look at what China has done in its own development. And I am no apologist for the Chinese state. I worked for 5 years with the Tibetan exile government, and I have strong feelings about how the Chinese state treats its own citizens. But how do we treat our own also? We need to ask that question, because that is how we're going to be judged. That's also how we maintain each other's security. We can talk about drug addiction, but here's another statistic. We have about 1.5 million armed forces in deployment and another 1.5 million in reserve. So that's about 3 million armed soldiers. In 2007, when I was preparing a brief on private security agencies, I found out that there were at least 5 million security guards employed by Indians. So the Indian state, for its external security, employs 3 million people. Indians, and forget the police, Indians out of their own pocket employ 5 million, which is 170% more than all our armed forces, for security against each other. that is where we put our money. In our insecurity against each other. This is the state we live in. Is this the state where we want to live in? Is this what we have achieved in 70 years? And that is a question we must come to always and ask, if my neighbor is not secure, how secure am I? And I would say we're not very secure.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for raising extremely important issues, that India is a country which is thriving, which is supposed to be on the global map, as we heard, and so on. And yet, the kind of poverty that we still live with is not only extensive, but hasn't improved a bit. It has probably got worse because of rising population and so on and so forth. But it's an extremely interesting point of view, and I thank you, Umar, for making it so nicely. Now, Atul, you are listed as a panelist.
Thank you for that.
So the editors are now you're the final panelist. Yeah.
So, first, I'm very much thrilled to be here with you people. Second, to see such eminent people sitting across me. So ideally, I should be sitting there, not here. So first, this hall is very much important for me for some historical reason. Exactly 4 years back, on 22nd July 2013, I released this book. And the idea for next book came from that panel discussion. It was set by Mr. B.G. Burgess, the former editor of Indian Express and my mentor. He gave me a target that by in next 2 years, by the time you will turn 31, you should come out with another volume. Sadly, I couldn't do it because I ideated much and could not deliver it on time, but there was reason for that. Earlier, I started working on an idea, India 2047. That was like a prognosis. And doing prognosis is always full with risks. So finally, I decided to let it go, and then had to choose this theme 3 years back. So I've been living this state of mind for last 4 years. Thousands of emails I had exchanged with my editor, Priyambada. Nirmanda is not here. He is a veteran of a publishing world, and I have had the opportunity to work with him. So the first book was about a struggling nation when it started from scratch. 1947 was just like a scratch for us because we lost our traditional layers over entrepreneurship, and we inherited something which was not suitable for us, but we somehow carried it. And certainly we got vision from Nehru, and Nehru, despite its fashion now to criticize everything which was done in the past, but I don't think everything which we done earlier was wrong, and we have really traveled a long way. 7 decades is a glorious track, and I'm really optimistic about the future as well. So coming back to the book first, I have taken your suggestion, and I'm certainly going to dwell upon the advices you have given me. But for some corrections, I would like to cite that I am very much a man of ground. Since I do hail from a rural terrain, which is very undeveloped, I do hail from Madhubani in Bihar, which is badly stricken with all bad things, floods, etc. So in this collection of essays, I will choose few essays which are directly dealing with rural India. Wajahat sir's essay, which is about Kashmir. It's not about metropolitan culture. It's about Kashmir and the whole losses, entire losses. Then Rajiv Jairam's essays, which is on federalism. It again touches India in a central-state relationship, and it covers all them bits. Your own essay, at great length speaks about the ground. And then Avinash Chaudhary has touched on governance issue. Jayati Ghosh has written almost 7,500 words long essay, and that is obsessed with rural India. Then Sandeep Dixit has written on human development thing. Ritika Khera on NRDGS. Namrata Goswami on Northeast, another side. Rajiv Bhattacharya too has dwelt upon that. Deepan Halder on subaltern voice. Abhay Mohanjan on fossil India. Then Abdullah Khan on identities in rural India. Udanaran Singh has touched upon linguistics, and his vision is view from below, utopia and chance, the theme of his essays. Namta Rathore and Manibrata Rathore has written a wonderful piece on Indian novel, and again he has covered vernacular literature beautifully, I think. My own essay is on Naxalism. I would not like to say much about that, but it is about Naxal terrains, which certainly don't exist in Mumbai, Delhi, or Calcutta, which exist in Bastar and other places. So coming back to the book is divided into 5 sections, and we have already heard the inner things from you all. So I don't want to take too much time. Rather, I would like to take some questions, and then I can hand it over to you, sir. Take it forward. One more thing. Pallavi has said probably that I have not given enough chance to women. 7 women writers. You should read all this. The second thing, you inducted only yesterday, and before that I tried with at least three women writers from this collection. They could not make to it for their own fault. And we are also missing one panelist who sadly passed away recently, Mr. Naresh Chandra, former cabinet secretary. Dramatically, when I was writing the last email, Wajahat sir has called me. So sorry for that.
Oh, thank you very much, Atul, for excellent work done. What I have suggested to him when we were having coffee was also that you've covered so many subjects that the next step should be to see how this can be divided into those 5 sections,
yes,
in greater detail to cover all the kind of
Sir, I'm a public policy professional as well, and my seniors are sitting here who are men of vision.
But
so I'm certainly going to share further points with them.
And I think that this is an extremely superb initiative that you have taken to touch on almost
I will work on another volume as well.
No, almost all the issues. I mean, we have all written on the number of books and so on, but generally they are confined to one segment of our history. And now you have written a lot which would inspire a large number of people, I'm sure, the students, researchers, public policy makers, to choose different subjects to talk a little bit more about. And you've done an excellent amount of research, and your contributors have done research. So I must congratulate you on giving us this opportunity to read the book and also to invite such a distinguished panel to comment on this. And we have heard all the panelists. They have covered almost all the aspects that you need to know about India in very brief interventions. So I must thank you, all of you. And now I think time has come to speak to the audience, and it has been provided for the audience to make some, to ask them questions and answers. So let me open the floor now for questions and answers, and I would suggest only one thing, that either you name a person to whom you are asking on what he or she has said, or something other than that from the book as to what is your question to that person, and you can then name the person or whatever. If you don't want to, then I can ask one of them to speak. So from the audience, yes please. Will you also introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Dr. Sarojit Dudeja. My question to Mr. Habibullah Saab. The way you pointed out the things are happening at present, I am the impression that disruptions are happening recently, whether it's a political, economic, social. And out of this disruption, some people are benefited. And these people are ungrateful. At the same time, there are people who are not benefited. They are revengeful. So this type of situation is happening, all types of situations, whether it's a political, social. I need not to say whether it's a Gorakshak or lynching or job loss. So how we are predicting, can you predict transition, which side it will take?
So far as, well, that of course I've tried to, in my article itself, I have tried to cover the way forward. And the way forward, to put it briefly, of course you'll read what I have to say, is to give the people, like elsewhere in the country, a sense of participation in governance, which is the essence of democracy. And we've heard from the panelists all over that this is not really happening. The way the future then lies in that sense coming. People must feel part of the policies which actually govern their lives, or they must feel their own contribution to it. If they feel excluded from it, then they're going to revolt against it. And this is, in my view, what has gone wrong in Kashmir. Because the progress towards further democratization, which I felt would have brought about the resolution, has not really happened. And therefore myself and other colleagues and others who have been taking an interest in the state have repeatedly suggested opening of dialogue, and the dialogue is the only way forward. So in answer to your question also, that is all I can say. And as I said, the institutional framework exists for that. We are a functioning democracy, right down to the panchayat level, right down to the village level. Let us use that strength to bring people into the form of interaction and dialogue, which will help resolve the issues and help government to address the issues which actually are of concern to the public.
Thank you, Wajahat. Now how I should go on that side. I will go. Then I will come that side, and let us see how many questions we can handle before we have to adjourn. Yes, please. Yeah, there. And introduce yourself.
I myself, what I like to ask you, sir, you are saying that in 1990 you have taken action in GM cotton so that 20,000 people died, suicided. You have regretting 27 years after. Like you, there are all of the policy maker, elite, ruling class, or our leaders are what they're doing when they are in the power, and they regret 10 years after, 20 years after. You see the actions. These are the reason our country is facing the problem of poverty, malnutrition. See our other countries like Brazil, China, they reduce so large number of people promote the poverty or malnutrition. Our policy maker, elite or ruling class, what they have to do so that poverty or malnutrition will be sorted out?
I think you made an excellent point. I think it's important to understand that firstly, I totally agree with you. Secondly, for us, GM cotton or GM was unknown in the 90s. It's unknown all over the world. It is very new. It took America 60 years to understand, but particularly with the kind of money being spent by the tobacco companies, the tobacco is bad for health. Hundreds of thousands of people died in America and all over the world because of cancer and tobacco. In India, we are now opening up GM after the experience of what happened there. At that time, we went unknown. Any policy maker frequently gets into unknown territory. He has to. The future is not to us. Nobody can prepare the roadmap. And therefore, at least my point is, at least we need to learn now. At least we have to understand that 30 of the most developed countries do not accept GM cotton. They are not idiots. Their leaders are not there. Understand that there are huge other factors which come to influence our academia, our research institutions, our governance, and our officers, and our politics to ensure this GM should come with facts not given here. That's the point being. The basic facts are not, and there are now clear studies which now show, not known in 90s, now known in the last 7-8 years, that GM cotton has failed all over the world. And Australia, 3 GM countries are Australia, Canada, and US. They are now rethinking. There are no case after case with I don't want to say any more now. The short point is policy will have to be taken blindly. We don't know the future, but at least you should learn. In 70 years, you should know that 80% of people are poor. And your point is valid, and therefore we have to see what we have done is wrong in the last 70 years. Something new has to be done, and that's the question we have to answer.
So, sir, according to you, our elite, our policy, our rulers are cheating this country.
No, we don't want a dialogue. You have asked a question, you have answered. Now, from that side. Hello. Yeah.
One more question here.
No, I'm going from there to there. Okay.
Next time.
Yeah. Yeah. And introduce yourself, please. Then I'll come to you.
Hi, Subramanian sir and Umair Ahmed sir. You made a very important point, like country should know 80% is poor. And Umair sir, when I was hearing you, it actually troubles me because the story you were relating, we see it every day. But somehow we all have become customized to it. I don't know whether you did some action after drinking that coffee and seeing those 2 ladies, and you talked about the security guards, right? But what I want to ask you guys, we have India is a different, very different animal when you compare with other. So you compared it with Bhutan. Is this the right comparison? That's one thing to be thought of. And another bit is, what's the solution? You are saying 80%, but during the partition, a lot of people lost their whole property and they had to shift it, but they made a lot of... So shouldn't we start thinking how each individual start making efforts rather than thinking about our governments and all those bits, because that's not happening. And you people can help us to think that roadmap. What's your thought on it?
What's your name?
Prashant.
Prashant. Okay, it's an important point. And I want to disaggregate two parts of it. Do understand, India has progressed, even among our very poor. Just look at life expectancy, literacy rates between the time of British Empire and today. Literacy rates were, what, 20%, 11%? At the time, 10%. Today, even if it's not great functional literacy, it's at least above 60%.
No, 80%.
It's also, I'm taking some of those with a pinch of salt as in how useful that literacy is. Secondly, again, life expectancy went from low 30s to 62. It's a huge difference. So it's not that India has not progressed. And that progress has, to a certain degree, gone down to even the very poor. The second part of it, which we keep coming back to, is what must the state do? That's, I think, where the problem has lain. And that's something that has come up again and again. A small set of people cannot transform a large country. It doesn't work like that. And your question about Bhutan is a very relevant question. Bhutan went from a country which is a subsistence economy to now having a per capita GDP of almost $3,000 a year per person. India has a per capita GDP of 1,800. All right, so Bhutan went from a country which didn't have a currency of its own in 1971 to being almost twice ours. Right? How did it do that? A combination of a very small country with a very focused development model. That's not something we can replicate, nor is it something that we should try. Because unfortunately what happens is, in trying to do that, a small elite, because look at the class character and of who goes to the right schools, gets in the top jobs, is part of this panel, and you'll find that half of us know each other. And that is because it's a state-passed process. The democratization aspect of it, of development from local and other areas, is where we need to focus on. And I don't want to go into that because it's a long conversation on economic development.
But if you wanted to add something.
Just half a minute only. I think we now know we have not done things right, as you have said now. Your question is, what should we do ahead? We have to go back. Is growth our only mantra? Should not growth, as you said, growth has taken place, correlated to income differential? Should we not have a target now that the bottom 60% should grow at 3 to 4 times higher than the top? Can you not engineer policies, number one? All over the world, it's a mathematical econometric correlation. Quality of education and the state of health of the country. Absolute quality of health, state of the country. What is the follow? In other words, you have to refocus the entire system now into these areas. What America did in 70 years, what China did in 40 years, India can now do with new technology in 10 years. And this is I think you can prepare a blueprint within half a page. If time is given, we all know what to do.
There, on that side, yeah.
मेरा सर विमल जलान सर से है. मेरा क्वेश्चन विमल जलान सर से है कि सर अपने देश के जो इकोनॉमिस्ट हैं, क्या वो कंफ्यूज्ड नहीं हैं कि 8 नवंबर 2016 के पहले जब हम जितना डिबेट सुनते थे, और ख़ास करके जो UPA 1 और UPA 2 के बाद, तो यही लगता है कि नोट के फॉर्म में ब्लैक मनी बहुत ज़्यादा है, और जो सामान्य हम लोग जो इकोनॉमिक्स को बहुत बढ़िया से नहीं जानते हैं, या गांव के लोग यही जानते थे, जो ये जो ब्लैक मनी है उसका एक पैरेलल मतलब इकोनॉमी है, जो फॉर्मल इकोनॉमी है उसके साथ साथ। लेकिन 8 नवंबर 2016 के बाद तुरंत ही बाद बहुत सारे इकोनॉमिस्टों को जिनको मैं मतलब कि टीवी पे देखता हूँ बोलते हैं, तो कहने लगे कि ब्लैक नोट के फॉर्म में तो ब्लैक मनी है ही नहीं। तो मुझे मतलब या हमारे जैसे बहुत सारे लोगों को बहुत आश्चर्य हुआ कि जो कल तक कहते थे जो ब्लैक मनी एक पैरेलल इकोनॉमी है ब्लैक रुपीज़ का, वो आज कह रहे हैं जो नहीं है। तो मेरा प्रश्न यही है कि क्या वो जनता के लिए काम करते हैं या अपने लिए काम करते हैं, कि हम जो कम जानने वाले लोग हैं, जो गांव के या जो उस विषय के मास्टर नहीं है, तो हमें फिर वो कन्फ्यूज़ क्यों करते हैं? अगर कन्फ्यूज़ करते हैं तो हमें कंफ्यूज करते हैं, तो आप जैसे जो डाइस पे बैठने वाले लोग हैं उन्हें बुलाते फिर क्यों हैं? जो है ये प्रश्न।
ये आपने एक बहुत अच्छा प्रश्न पूछा है, लेकिन इट हैज़ नथिंग टू डू विथ इकोनॉमिक्स पर से, इन द सेंस दैट द कंट्री इज रन बाय पॉलिटिक्स।
सर मैं ये जोड़ना चाहूँगा इसमें कि ये जो ट्रांजिशन वर्ड है बुक का, तो क्या ये जो एक काम है उस ट्रांजिशन वर्ड को ख़त्म करने में वो क्या कैपेबल तो एक हो सकता है कि हम ये ट्रांजिशन से हम डेवलप के साइड चले जाएंगे, जो उसमें एक कदम एक बड़ा कदम क्या नहीं हो सकता है? नहीं है।
नहीं, देखिए वही द पॉइंट आई एम ट्राइंग टू मेक टू यू इज दैट ट्रांजिशन इज नॉट अबाउट इकोनॉमिक्स पर से, इट्स अबाउट पॉलिटिक्स, इकोनॉमिक्स एंड गवर्नेंस, you know, in the sense that you need three structures in the democracy. Politics, you can announce a policy, which is very good, that we will abolish poverty. You know, in 1952, we announced that poverty in India would be alleviated or removed by 1980. And you are now in 2017. That was politics, second plan, 56. So what I am saying to you is that it's not a question of blame and not blame. It's a question of trying to fix the situation as we see it today. And the main problem that we haven't been able to handle, in my view, is the politics of India. Not in terms of democracy, but in terms of governance. That we are not accountable. That is the main issue. We are not accountable. आप जाइए पार्लियामेंट में, मैं वहाँ नॉमिनेटेड मेंबर था, बैक बेंचर, आई रिटन अ बुक ऑल्सो. Sorry to take your time, but the main point that I made there, कि आप कुछ भी क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं, हरदम आंसर होगा कि इट्स अंडर कंसिडरेशन. यदि ये TSR का यदि प्रश्न आप पूछें कि पॉवर्टी क्यों नहीं एलिविएट हुई, तो कहा कि हो रही है, तो रही है 1.3% by 1.5%. No, but what I'm saying is that कुछ जवाब हम दे देंगे उसका. तो ये हमारे यहाँ जो बॉटम लाइन है, it's not economics, it's the politics of economics. Okay, sorry, because you asked me personally, so I'm saying, but I'm going to the other side now. It's there. I'm going to just switch from this side to that side so that nobody.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Next one. After this.
I'm Nikhil Rampal from The Print. It's a startup by Shekhar Gupta, sir. So my question is to the optimistic person, Mr. Dhruv Jaishankar. Right. So in the light of that, sir, you just mentioned about the statistics about how India is growing. So let me tell you that it's because of the service sector that India is growing, and all of us know that service sector-led growth is not sustainable. 50% of the population which is employed in agriculture sector is just producing 16% of the GDP. Right. In the light of that, and sir, one more thing to all the policymakers, we till date do not have a proper agriculture policy. We do not have a service sector policy. In the absence of these policies, how come you predict that by 2035 India would be touching the targets? Right? And in fact, even if we have some policies, now today the Comptroller and Auditor General report about the agriculture insurance came out, and it said that all the policies, all the schemes relating to crop insurance that could have acted as a substitute to farm loan waivers have not been implemented properly. So in the light of that, Mr. Speaker, can you please tell me how do you predict such a high state of growth or high state of development by the year of 2035? Because I don't see it in the facts.
Thank you. Your passion is very appreciated. We need more passionate people like you, but we also need facts, right? And we can't predict the future. Nobody can. My job is not to predict the future. I don't think anybody else is here. But we can make projections with reasonable certainty. I would suggest that if you do get a copy of the book, look at page 190 to 191, and particularly Jayati Ghosh's, this is from Jayati Ghosh's essay. And this shows this is simply a demographic pyramid. The Indian population is growing, as you know. It's also decelerating. Its growth is decelerating. The basic metrics, education, healthcare, are not great by global standards, but nor are they. But they have improved. And this is a lot of this is happening, by the way, not because of the state, but not because of policies, but despite policies. The entire primary and secondary education sectors in India is largely privatized. India has one of the highest percentages of private education in the world. So in fact, it's a testament to the failure of the state. That being said, service-driven growth is a big part of it. But even in the absence, if we do see a bit of a flatlining in service sector growth, this is a consumer-driven economy as well. And so, I mean, if you look at the demographics, if you look at the basic health and economic health and human development indicators, I'll just give you a few.
No, don't give a few because we are running out.
One example.
Give a few.
No, I'll just give one. If you look at HDI indicators, just to put this in perspective, India in 1980 had HDI indicators that were equivalent to the 15th century in the West. The 15th century. By 2015, 35 years later, it's the same as the 1870s. So we've made a transition that took the West 350 years in 35 years. I can't imagine how you would not be optimistic after that.
Thank you. One more question I will take before we run out of time. Can I?
Sir,
one more question.
Yes, sir.
May I just ask that lady there on the
I'm Anushna and I'm a student of political science and development. My question is not to anybody in particular, whoever might want to answer it. So this book seems like an eclectic mix of subjects, which also in a sense mirrors the issues that confront our country. How do you see that diversity and that intersectionality in the solutions that we should come up with to deal with issues of, say, caste, gender, class?
One more last question. I won't get back to you. Please excuse me.
I'll ask a question.
One mic, please.
I'm Saurabh Sanyal, Secretary General of the PhD Chamber.
Very good.
My question is to Mr. Mahat Habibullah and also to you, sir. I spent 13 years in the JNK. Before my current tenure, I was in the armed forces. And I would like to narrate an incident that I am very optimistic about JNK because I have seen it from the ground. I was in Kupwara in 1991. Prior to that, my first tenure was in 1981. And the first bomb blast took place in Srinagar in the month of June in 1984. That was an eye-opener. Actually, that was a time when the government should have, the Chief Minister, the then Chief Minister should have reacted and found out, because it was the tip of the iceberg. It was an indication that it would have happened. Thereafter, when I was posted there and we moved from villages to villages, the sentiments were always with India. It was always with India because the Indian security forces, the government people, they were always for the local people. Things were happening and happening at a rapid pace. Between 2007...
Can you please, it's not a question, you are making an observation.
No, I'm just
don't give a lecture now.
No lecture, sir. I'm just trying to put across the point that we cannot be pessimistic about J&K. We have to be optimistic. It will change. It will definitely change.
I mean that you are entitled to that point of view. Now, we don't have the time, so I have to.
Last
question is to Dhruv.
No. Excuse me. There is no time. We have run out of question. Hour is over now, except for one. So the two.
Sir, one update. We have time.
I was just wondering what
1
you
minute.
thought about
No, but it
mediation. Today, even Mr. Farooq Abdullah has spoken about China's and the US's, do you see any scope of international mediation on Kashmir?
So, Wajahat,
if I may just
the
answer very briefly.
No, 1 minute. Just two issues have been raised about Kashmir. So you take a question, take the answer,
Certainly.
and keep it very short.
Certainly, on the question of your, you said you're from the army, but you didn't say what your name was or your rank was.
Saurabh Sanyal, sir.
And
I took premature retirement in 19...
General Brigadier Colonel what?
Yes.
So Colonel Sanyal, I myself have an army background, as you probably know. My father set up the National Defence Academy in Karakwasla, and I agree with you to the extent that the army has done a great deal. But there is, even today, a huge difference of opinion in the army as to how the situation at present is being handled. But you can come to that later, we can discuss that later. On the question which you have raised, sorry, could you repeat the question?
I was just talking about the scope of any international mediation.
No, this is basically the issue in Kashmir is an internal issue for India, for us. There has been internal interference by a foreign country, we know that. That foreign country, the scope for international mediation can only be to the extent of that foreign country being told to shut up. But so far as the problem is concerned, it is an internal problem of ours and we have to resolve it ourselves.
Okay. Now, there is one, that question that was asked by... No, there is no time. No, please excuse me. Please don't... We have to stick to time.
Outside we can.
We have to stick to time if you want India to transit first. Now, the question I will ask...
Answer to his question.
I will request the TSR. He wanted to say something, 1 minute. But 1 minute, and you then take her question also, because she didn't name any particular person. Yeah.
Which question?
The student of political science. Student of political. What was your question? You tell him.
So I wanted to know whether the
interrelationship on the solutions only, not the problems.
Yeah.
Yes. For you, sir, let me tell you.
Okay, one more minute, then you can take this. Yeah.
You're very quickly.
1 minute.
Quickly.
One player.
Okay, I actually have 2 questions. I have one.
No, you can't have.
No, you got 10 seconds.
Please.
Okay. Given the right wing and the populism rise in the West, in what ways and in what sectors or strategy can India really capitalize on that, that rising populist sentiment? Because as you know, among the Western powers, they're busy in their whataboutery on all international platforms and summits. So in what way can a developing country and the Southeast Asia and the Southeast Asian bloc capitalize on that? And basically, on an economic question, do you think across for all of you, given we have a rise in automation and AI, and which is basically destroying the labor cost advantage?
Okay, I think that you have made your point. You have made a point, very good point, and now I request yes.
I will take half a minute, exactly half a minute. Sir, I am more optimistic than anybody in this room, number one. Number two, I am saying only because after 70 years, after 50 years, the first 20 years we were all right. After 50 years, there is now hope in the country again. That country that situation has come. If we do not use this period of 3 to 5 years, country will not wait more than that. We will not proceed. Jayashankar, last week's 1 month back report of Pew Foundation of New York has said Indian education is the worst in the world. Worst. And I now bet that if the same study is done and therefore the solution comes from you, you now have to think like one government. Delhi pollution will not go by 20 people not accepting responsibility. Poverty will not go by 50 ministries not accepting responsibility. And it all depends on one man deciding should be done. And solution has to be. In other words, problems are diverse, solution has to be integrated.
Okay, now I would, I think that we have had a very excellent presentation. There was not sufficient time. It was an excellent book. So I would request the publisher to try and see in what way they can give more opportunity to people to interact later on. And my apologies to all the audience for interrupting you. The reason is that we are run out of time, and I don't want to, to exceed the time limit, because that, as I said, India is in transition. But we have fixed resources, fixed time. And now may I just request Tushar to say the final thank you to all.
Thank you, sir. Trisha, if you could please have the vote of thanks.
While the entire world is looking towards India and China as superpowers in the future, we must approach our past and the present from the perspective of the future. With this book, India Now and in Transition, we intend to touch base with the recent developments in our country, remembering that the present is a function of the past as well as expectations of the future. On that note, on behalf of Niyogi Books, I would like to thank the erudite panel with us here today. And these deliberations, I'm sure, will make the concept of nation in transition more clearer to us. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Jalan for chairing the session so successfully. You've been a role model to many of us. I would also like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the panelists as well as contributors to the book. First of all, Mr. Subramaniam, you've been a veteran administrator, and thank you so much for sharing your analysis and insights, and we'll definitely take your advice in consideration and work towards it. Mr. Wajahat Habibullah, as always, we are extremely delighted to have you with us and hear you today. Mr. Umair Ahmed, thank you for posing all those obvious and not so obvious questions for us to ponder upon. Mr. Dhruv Jayashankar, thank you very much for those perceptive comments and those dynamic words. Miss Pallavi Revapragada, thank you very much for providing us with those flabbergasting numbers and information. And again, that's a lot to think about and ponder on. And I would also like to thank Atul K Thakur for diligently pursuing the work of bringing together a mind-boggling array of powerful articles. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank the press and media for the continued support we've always received from you. IIC, members of IIC who have helped us organize this event today, and everybody in the audience today. Without your support, it wouldn't have been possible today. Thank you so much. And last but not the least, if you have more questions, please feel free to write at niyogibooks@gmail.com. It's given in that bookmark that we've given to you, or write to us on the Facebook page. We'll definitely try and get answers for you. Thank you.
May I just ask for an applause for Niyogi Books? And thank you Atul. Thank you Atul for doing all this and bringing so many good people here.